Back in the day, before streaming, before CDs, we listened to music on albums. A vinyl disc spinning 33 and a third revolutions per minute brought us great music one side at a time. 20 or so minutes of music, 4 or 5 songs usually, that created a single listening experience. This format exposed us to other songs of the artist, not just the hits, and often flowed in an order that was created to build and maintain or mold a musical experience for the listener.
Sideshow brings musical experiences from the past to life today. Here, we discuss and review individual sides of record albums we have grown to appreciate and hope you will too. Welcome to The Sideshow. All right, welcome back to The Sideshow. For this installment, Mark is going to be presenting a side. Mark, what do you have for us today?
Well, thanks, Mike. Today, I would like to talk about the album Dreamboat Annie by Heart, Side 1. And we'll get into the contents of the album in just a second, but just to step back a little bit and talk about Heart, the band. This was Dreamboat Annie was their first album, and just a little bit of history stepping back. Dreamboat Annie was actually released in 1975, but the band itself was actually started in the Seattle area in the late 60s, around 1967, before the Wilson sisters got involved. Steve Fossen and Roger Fisher were basically in high school together, and a guitar and bassist, and they did a band, kind of a high school band. They toured around to other high schools and local clubs, and brought some other people in, and eventually became a band called White Heart. And this band over time eventually changed its name from White Heart to just Heart, settling in on that. And a little bit of, people transitioning in and out of the band until they eventually came in contact with the Wilson sisters. Ann Wilson got to know the brother of Roger Fisher, Michael Fisher, who had come down from Canada to listen to one of the Heart band performances where Ann Wilson was actually there. As it turns out, Michael was he'd gone to Canada so that he would not have to serve in the draft for the Vietnam War. So he was a draft dodger. And the relationship that started with Ann Wilson, she ended up moving up to Vancouver with him. And then some of these other members of the band also made their way up to Vancouver, and eventually Ann's sister Nancy all ended up in Vancouver. And I think it's important, we'll hear when we get into some of the songs on this track, the Vietnam War and the presence of this draft was something on everybody's mind at that time. We talk, obviously there's continues to be talk about wars around the world and whether it be the U.S. military or other actions, but we have not had to deal with anything like this idea of everybody coming of age, becoming adults, had to worry about the draft and how it was going to impact them and what they were going to do about them. And I think that weighed much heavier on people than we can imagine, because we haven't had to deal with it. But we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into some of the songs on this first album. But this did form. It was a successful album for Heart. It was buoyed in part by the fact that they had the opportunity to open up for Rod Stewart in Montreal at the Montreal Forum. The original opening act for Rod canceled, and on a day's notice, Heart was contacted. This is while they were getting the material ready, and they had some initial success with some songs like Magic Man and Crazy on You. And they went to this Montreal Forum and performed, and this was a launch pad for this album Dreamboat Annie that came out right at that time. They had some very solid success with this, and it led to a dispute with their record company, Mushroom Records in Canada. The record company, without the Wilson sisters really knowing about it, aired an advertisement that implied that the Wilson sisters were actually lesbian lovers. Believe it or not, this pissed them off that this had occurred. On the one hand, it created a rift with the record company that eventually drove them away from them. At the same time, it got Ann Wilson so mad that she wrote the song Barracuda, which I think that the music world is happy to have heard.
Well, and I'm familiar with the controversy that you're talking about, and I don't know where the photograph was published initially, but it was a photograph. It's a black and white photograph that was from the same photo session from the cover of Dreamboat Annie, their first album, and both Anne and Nancy Wilson are bare shouldered, and it's a different photo than the one that found its way onto the album, but it's from the same session.
Yes.
And they have a little more sort of sinister looks on their faces, and the caption for the picture read, "Hearts Wilson sisters confess it was only our first time," was the language that was used, and that's kind of what gave rise to the insinuation that there was some kind of lesbian connection between these two sisters.
Yes.
And in some ways, it's kind of ironic because, the picture at issue was about as much skin as the Wilson sisters ever showed. I mean, and these are two very, in my opinion, very, very sexy women. But other than showing some cleavage, a little décolletage, they didn't show skin. That wasn't their thing. They let the music. They expressed themselves by their music. I mean,
yes,
they were more. Like back in those days, like performers like Pat Benatar or Chrissy Hind.
Yes.
They didn't. You never see their belly button. They don't come out and they don't show a lot of leg.
Yes.
As opposed to like Ruby Starr that sang with Black Oak, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Or certainly like Madonna or Lady Gaga or whoever, where women are Jennifer Lopez or Beyonce, Miley Cyrus, women performing in their underwear. They just weren't like that.
Yeah.
And so it's and that photo, it shows nothing. It's just their shoulders but it's about as explicit and as much skin as you ever saw from the Wilson sisters, but that did not detract from a sort of tough feminine sex appeal that I think they were able to maintain for a long time.
Oh, absolutely. And they although that type of sex appeal was there, I agree 100% with your point. That's not what they flaunted. Their abilities in songwriting, and then their abilities to perform, especially the vocals of Ann Wilson. Completely stood on their own.
Yeah.
And we'll talk in just a minute about the type of sound that they were able to create. But it pissed them off. This whole back and forth, and they basically just said they were done with Mushroom Records, even though they were under contract to deliver another album. The record company themselves took some half-completed material that the band had already recorded and very rapidly released an album called Magazine, which through some negotiations with the company, they agreed to pull that back, and the band did, in fact, finish up those songs. So it was a more completed, more professional product that came out, and they did in fact release that album on Mushroom Records, and then they were done contractually, and they switched over to CBS Records or Portrait Records, where they were already working on the album Little Queen, which was another just huge success for the band, and songs like Barracuda and other hits that came from that. And then they put another album out, Dog and Butterfly, that came out, and then albums like Baby Lestrange at the right as the '80s were coming around, and they hit kind of a commercial break. They released a couple albums that really weren't quite as strong. They were going through some lineup changes at the time. They came back in the mid '80s with just a band self-titled Heart that was very popular. Released a number of top singles from there, but they had clearly transitioned more into a pop rock or even hair band type mode. Their costumes were all kind of like Renaissance steampunk type look to them, and they really transitioned away from some of the combination of folk and hardness of their early albums.
Well, by the time you're talking about, they had, which wasn't necessarily inappropriate at the time, but they sort of tailored their music and their appearance to the MTV
Yes.
aspect of music at that time, and but I definitely prefer their earlier. I mean, I think Dreamboat Annie and Little Queen are definitely their best albums.
Yes.
Magazine had like Heartless was on there, and Dog and Butterfly was very it was popular. That might have been a #1 album, Dog and Butterfly. And there were radio songs on Baby Lestrange. I mean, was it was Straight On for You on that album? Might have been Even It Up.
Yes.
I believe was a song. I mean, they were those two ladies could crank out some rock and roll. I mean,
well, and
they really could.
And I mean, I would argue some hard rock and roll.
Yeah.
We a lot of times, especially with some of their later material, and they did have a lot of they had a number of ballads that were very soft. We'll talk about a couple of them when we get into the side. But I mean, they were, especially in their earlier material, those first through the '70s and very early '80s. I mean, they put out some hard rock music. And I was actually talking to someone about this recently. It's like, well, what do you mean by hard? And now we've got so much, heavy metal that's out there and whatever. It's really hard to try to step back into the '70s and what was hard rock and what wasn't. And I think of like really heavy music, really loud heavy music, and the loudest concert that I ever attended. I attended it with you. It was in Milwaukee. It's when we went to see AC/DC on their Back in Black tour. But the opening band for AC/DC was actually significantly louder than AC/DC was, and that was Blackfoot that opened up from them. A very hard, heavy band. They had the song "Train, Train," which just opened with this. Well, it opened up with kind of a harmonica type of piece, but then it jammed into this dum 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 dum. But you listen to that song, and you can put Barracuda right next to it, and say just as hard, just as heavy of a guitar that was grinding at you, and the vocal performances of Ann Wilson were also very solid and they could be very rough, they could be very soft and gentle, but it could also be just a certain almost violence to her vocals. And in the mid '80s. VH1 came out with a listing of the 100 best hard rock. This was specifically hard rock bands of all time, and Heart came in 57th, in front of bands like Megadeth and Anthrax. And I mean, when you're placed in front of those kind of bands in a hard rock list, you clearly have a reputation within the industry as belting out some hard and heavy music.
Well, I think that if you ask the Wilson sisters, where they were coming from back when they were, in the '70s, that they would say that the musical parent that gave birth to them was Led Zeppelin. And in fact, you mentioned the Barracuda riff. very similar to a guitar riff in Zeppelin's Achilles' Last Stand
Hmm.
from the Presence album. And so uh, uh, I think that Hart might have copped that from Zeppelin.
Well, and they obviously were huge Zeppelin fans. They released on their own some covers of Led Zeppelin songs, and I think that the respect was reciprocal. I mean, Hart performed at the Kennedy Center honors performance for Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
They performed Stairway to Heaven, and I think Going to California. At that performance. So yes, clearly some influence from there, but also when you listen to the lyrics, and especially on this album, which we can get into now, some things that were very relevant specifically to them at the time in the Northwest. But first, let's take a quick look at the album itself. It's a gatefold album, but the cover. This is the image we were talking about a little bit earlier. This bare-shouldered image of the two of them, kind of with a longing look on their faces. Certainly enjoyable to look at. Certainly myself as a teenage boy and enjoyed the cover. The back a little simpler, just with some information on the tracks and a number of pictures on the gatefold of members of the band, either in performance or in the studio or this type of thing. I do think this is interesting. This has plugged the band, even though the Wilson sisters did not start Heart. The bass and guitar had been playing together for a while, but by the time they were able to release this album, it was Ann Wilson, Nancy Wilson, and with these other members that were really kind of sidelined. And I think that the front work and the songwriting that Ann and Nancy did was really a significant part of their success. And then the album itself, the sleeve, all the lyrics to the songs again to check out, and of course the record itself with the now infamous Mushroom Records that was there. So side one, which I want to focus on for today, four tracks on the five songs. There's kind of an initial, I'll call it a pre-prize for the song Dreamboat Annie, and then a reprise of that at the end of the side. But it starts out with the song Magic Man, which is again, heavy guitar riff to kick this song off. It's really a song about a young girl that is seduced by an older man. It starts with the voice of the girl and how she meets this person, and she's warned by this guy. He's a magic man. He doesn't necessarily want any sex or love. He just wants to go back and get high for a while with this girl. The next voice in the lyrics, as the lyrics continue, is the voice of the mother, now wanting the girl to come home, and that she shouldn't be with this guy. And the final voice is from the man himself, just saying, "Look, I always said I was a magic man." So really, just kind of a story, this glimpse into the mind of the girl, the mother, and the man, and the magic man that come up.
Come home, my daughter. Don't live with the drug dealer.
Exactly. just a pretty common theme, I'm sure, with a lot of young, especially someone like the Wilson sisters, who slid across the border to another country to start this band, and both of them in relationships with the men involved with this band. I will say, we talk sometimes. Obviously, our focus is on listening to records. We just on a recent episode we talked about Santana and how it can be a good thing to watch videos of bands. I do not recommend this for any of Heart's early videos and albums. Back then, music videos, if it wasn't actual concert performance, were some pretty hokey and corny music kind of videos with a lot of bad lip sync and pretty poor performances. The Magic Man video that was put out in 1976, it looks like something from Spinal Tap. The bass, the bass player Steve Fossen is staring into the camera, and he's trying to lick the camera with his eyes. You can see it really is it really is almost embarrassing. So I don't recommend watching the video. Listen to the music, side one of Dreamboat Annie, and it starts with Magic Man again. A very heavy song with a, I would actually call it kind of a light back and forth about the topic of a young girl meeting an older man, but a good kickoff and a foot tapper to the side.
And when this music was current, when it was first out, I mean, Magic Man, along with some of the others on this side, were ubiquitous on the radio.
Yes.
I mean, we were like in seventh grade or something. I mean, it was
Yeah.
we were going to junior high school at the time, and first starting to actually pay, or at least I was in my early stages of paying attention to what was on the radio and kind of identifying stuff I did or didn't like and what sort of records I'd be interested in buying. And Magic Man was you heard it a lot.
Yes.
And it was kind of a heavy song. I mean, it was definitely what I would have called at that time, a hard rock song.
Yeah.
And instrumentally pretty good. And, and there's that break in the middle where there's some guitar, and then there's like a synthesizer at the end of the break. And then before the song proper starts up again, you have this part where I assume both Wilson sisters are just going, oh,
Yep.
oh. And even as a seventh grade boy, and certainly later, I found that sound of those two women singing just incredibly sexy.
Yes.
And in seventh grade, I mean, that was before I was, thinking about women, the way I was a few years later, or females, the girls at school, or, I mean, it just, and there is, I mentioned Pat Benatar and Chrissy Hind, for example. There's something that very alluring about an assertive yet vulnerable female singing rock and roll, and not having to have it, not having to show skin to make it effective, and just the sound of those vocals is it sticks in my mind even today. I can remember taking note of it back then, because as we continued through junior high school and early high school, I can remember identifying certain girls at school that would potentially be like the Wilson sisters. And it wasn't, and these weren't the cheerleaders or the the A-list girls, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Hart made a very big impression just to the popular music culture in general. And while I would never, I've never identified Hart as one of my favorite bands, but although I've got their music on LP and CD, but they definitely made an impression for when I first heard them on the radio, and which has more or less lasted.
Well, and it was one of the reasons why, for what would turn out to be later, in other words, years later, to your point, this stuff came out when we were pretty young. We weren't buying a lot of albums in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, whereas we were as we got into high school. But the singles, the radio play, to your point, was everywhere on these particular songs, and on as we got into Little Queen as well. And that led to later, okay, well, we've got these albums now, let's listen to them, and being able to enjoy those albums from, especially when the music was was very rock oriented, as opposed to a lot of the other music. This was not Midnight at the Oasis. This was not a lot of stuff that was coming out
Yeah.
in the early and mid '70s. This was not Seasons in the Sun. This was,
Yeah.
this was rock music that when we got into high school and later years where we're listening to a lot of albums, this popped back in
Yeah.
as quality type music to listen to. And then this side, it had a couple hits on it. We lead into the next song that we get to on the side, which is just about 1 minute and 10 seconds. It is the first that we hear of the song Dreamboat Annie. Just a short version of it. And this song, we end up hearing more of it at the end of the side, so I'm going to kind of talk about it together as a single song. There's also another reprise of it on the second side of the album, kind of short bursts of this song. But it starts out, there's kind of a very light guitar mixed in with some banjo in this song, and there's a couple different kind of takes you can look at about what are they saying here, what do they mean. I've seen where someone thinks that this is this is kind of a drug trip. Your head is in the clouds, you're kind of moving, and it's got some industry of painted smiles on magazine faces. That it just that could be interpreted as that. I myself don't see it that way. I see this more, especially when you're hearing this banjo kind of go lightly in the background. I see more like either a country girl or an innocent girl making their way in the big city, or potentially in this case a young girl starting to make their way in the music industry. But really the big city resonates the most with me, mainly because when this song was being written, the Wilson sisters were not famous musicians at this time. This was being written before that actually occurred. So, but they were trying to make their way in a new city, in a new town, grown up life, not really known, and you hear this, talking about dreams, and there's tomorrow is a big part of heart lyrics in a lot of their songs, and having dreams that they've got a song on a later album called Dreams, that just a lot about opportunity, hope for the future, dreams that they have was a big part of their thing, and I really think that's what the song is focusing on. They headed out this morning, and this diamond little one, someone who's got some opportunity, got some talent, and they find themselves in this city where they're alone, but they're not necessarily lonely, and they're looking at faces that they're smiling, but they're just a painted on smile. For a lot of the other people that they're passing in the city, they really don't know who these other people are. But it's also, there's a sense of optimism and hope that comes along with this song. The song is not like a downer type song. The song is not a lonely song. The feeling of the song is very upbeat with what they're saying, both here and in the reprise at the end of the side.
I think Dreamboat Annie is a beautiful song, and it reminds me very much, both musically and lyrically, with the song "Everybody's Talking," performed by Harry Nilsson. Mm-hmm. It's like it's played at the beginning of the movie Midnight Cowboy. Mm-hmm. And I think that the music, you mentioned there's the acoustic guitar, and then there's some banjo in there. Mm-hmm. I think the music in Everybody's Talking is very similar to that. And,
yes,
and that song came out first. I don't know whether it had any influence, but it has a very similar feel, very similar vibe. And when the opening lyrics of Dreamboat Annie, the heading out this morning into the sun, riding on the diamond waves, mm-hmm. Warm wind caress her. You had this feeling of, okay, we're heading out and getting away from whatever it is that, where, and everybody's talking. It's like, I'm going where the sun keeps shining in the pouring rain, banking off of the northeast winds, sailing on a summer breeze, and skipping over the ocean like a
Hmm.
stone. It really the songs are very similar,
Yes.
and I've always liked both of them. I never it was only relatively recently that I made the connection between the two songs. But
Hmm.
I think the music and the lyrics present a very similar, very effective, uh, just longing to get away from it all,
Well,
and be away from just the noise and glare of life in your face.
well,
Is
music that certainly music that I like. I mean, everybody enjoys music in a different way, but the when I can connect to a feeling that I have or that I have had, that's one of the things that makes me enjoy music and listening to it. And what I think of when I hear this song is you touched on it there when you're leaving out right as the sun is coming up and you're driving on a vacation. You're just leaving from home and you're heading somewhere that you're really looking to going, and you're sipping your first cup of coffee in the car. The sun is coming up on the interstate, and this song, this that's what I feel like when I'm listening to this song. Those are really really aligned with me. So there's you can kind of go and read some of these blogs or whatever about the meanings of this song, and some of them cast a little bit more negative kind of feel from it. I just don't feel that when I'm listening to this song. Just a good feeling of escape.
it's a light for me. It's a light expression of the desire to or the experience of getting away and
Hmm.
getting away from the noise and getting out and the sound of the waves and the seagulls are a calming, sort of optimizing uh, thing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't change the
Well,
fact that doesn't change the fact that the dream's going to end. You got to wake up on Monday morning and be back at it. But that's the feeling that I get from the song.
absolutely. And that approach from different directions is really where we go for the rest of this side as well. Because the next song, Crazy on You, is really kind of a focus on the you've got someone in this case you've got you've got Ann Wilson singing this song, and life is difficult. Life is hectic. There's a lot going on that is to be disliked in life, and with the bombs and the devils and the kids keep coming. Nowhere to breathe easy. No time to be young. And I really think that drives at the draft. These people that are supposed to be, this is when you're having fun. You're 20 years old. You've got your whole life in front of you. Whether it be that coming out of or in a college experience or young in life. This is when everything is supposed to be open for you, and you're worried about this fucking draft, right? You're worried about getting sent off to some place you don't want to go, to what is known by this time. This is the early 70s. This everybody knows this is a horrible experience. The days of being World War II and marching through Paris and the glory are gone from the Vietnam War. And this is something that's weighing on people, and so there's all this stuff. There's all this strife and potentially political turmoil, and there's bad stuff that's going on that people are seeing every day. And the only thing that this person has left is they can come home to their lover, and she can get crazy on him. And that there's some different descriptions in there, but a lot of the song is talking about what's going on negative outside, but they've got this whole note, we've got each other, and this is how I am going to get through the day. This is how I'm going to find happiness, or I'm at least going to survive. And that is by getting all over you at the end of the day when we come home. And the belting vocal performance of Ann Wilson convinces you that that's exactly what she wants to do. Um, um,
The well, I mean, I agree with your take on the lyrics. I don't think there's anything particularly controversial about that. That's a and and it's almost like the day makes you crazy, but
Mm-hmm.
you hold it together. And then at night, she and her lover can sort of exercise the crazy out,
Yes.
so that they come the next morning, they can go back and kind of have
Do
to
it again.
do what's
Yeah.
going on in the world, and that's how they do it. Uh, uh, I think it's a great song, and the acoustic guitar intro.
Yeah.
We mentioned Led Zeppelin as sort of a very influential band. I actually think that this acoustic guitar intro sounds a little more like Yes, a little more like Steve
Mm-hmm.
Howe. Some of the guitar picking there, stuff like the clap on the Yes album,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. It has a yes sort of
Yes.
feel to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and uh, but when after the acoustic guitar intro, when the electric guitar comes in and the song proper, the it kind of sounds like another band that was big around the same time, which was Jefferson Starship.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not Starship like we built this city,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
that, but
More like White Rabbit Starship.
well, no. Well, like three albums came out in the '70s, which the Jack Cassidy and Jorma Kaukonen had left Jefferson Airplane. They were the original lead guitarist and bassist.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but and then Marty Balin, one of the singers, was doing something else. But Grace Slick and Paul Kantner, the rhythm guitar player in Jefferson Airplane, continued with Jefferson Starship. But then Marty Balin came back,
Mm-hmm.
and albums like Red Octopus,
Okay.
Spitfire, and uh, uh, there's another one that came around the same time. But
Mm-hmm.
then they had some hits. There was like Miracles
Yep.
and Count on Me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in any case, uh, it sounded like Jefferson Starship with Grace Slick, who's also a very powerful vocalist, who
Yeah.
didn't have the need to show skin,
Mm-hmm.
really, when she performed, and so that it combined a couple of different sort of sounds, and I thought it was a great song, um,
Mm-hmm.
and another one. I mean, it was just as Magic Man and Crazy on You were both big on the radio at that
Yeah.
time, and uh, and but when you get down, I mean, all this comparison aside, it's just a good hard rock song, just a good
Yeah.
hard rock song.
Yeah. Yeah. And you end up with this, and then you really switch gears in the next song on the side, which is Soul of the Sea. But the theme is still the same. And it is still about this idea where you've got a place that you can go or that you can be to find peace. And the by the sea, on the beach, is kind of the illustration that they're leveraging here. I think it means a lot of different things in a lot of different places to everybody. But clearly growing up near the sea, that is when you talk about these, the seagulls and this kind of thing, is a place where you're escaping the day to day. And in this particular case, it's with someone. Being at the sea with someone is their place to be, and a place that they enjoy. And one of the keys, and it's very early in the song. There's a lyric that just goes, it's like time, 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 time. Never ask what has become of us. Kind of like, if we can just enjoy here and not have time catch up with us. It's like being on a Sunday when you're on a weekend, and it almost feels worse than Monday morning, because you get a feeling that your weekend is slipping away from you. And it's like the Packer game just got over on Sunday afternoon, and you realize you've got to go to work the next day, and it just again, the feeling is worse than Monday morning for some reason. But that you feel this idea, it's like, no, stay away from us, stay away from this. We're enjoying this, and she talks to this, whether it be her lover or companion, that your dreamer in the sand, just lie there laughing till the fall. Can we just stay here as long as possible all summer long until the fall catches up with us and time eventually does. And it has this kind of peaceful, kind of sliding, easy section of the song, and then it breaks, though. It really changes up in the middle portion of the song, where it's very clear that they are now back in their daily life. It switches fairly quickly, and the song becomes very jagged, almost irritating, and angry as it goes. It's wake up late without a smile. Telephone rings. You run like a child, and it starts to get angrier. No smile, no sorrow, no laughter, no tomorrow. Tomorrow is a big part of Heart's lyrics, and tomorrow in a hopeful way, right? You hear songs like what is that, Kid Rock, all summer long, where it's
Oh,
like sipping whiskey from the bottle, not thinking about tomorrow, right? That
yeah.
that's where you hear some references tomorrow saying, no, the good thing is not worrying about tomorrow. That's not the way that Heart approaches a lot of their lyrics. Tomorrow is very hopeful. In a lot of their songs, tomorrow's going to be a better time. This war in Vietnam is going to end, and we're going to have better times in the future. So when you hear the idea of no tomorrow, that's a bad thing, right? For what they're talking about.
The uh, this song, and it had been a long time since I'd actually listened to the album, and I you tipped me off to what you were
Mm-hmm.
doing, and so I gave it a look see, and there's also, just musically on this one, there's some acoustic guitar in Soul of the Sea that is very Yes like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds very much like the acoustic guitar at the beginning of "And You and I,"
Yes,
in my opinion.
I'd agree.
But that's just kind of a little seasoning. I mean, the song itself, and I think it's the longest song
Yes.
on the side, is really very much like because it's a longer song, and it's very much like one of those tracks off of side 3 of Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like a little mini epic, and kind of like like sort of like Down by the Seaside with a
Yeah.
little 10 Years Gone thrown in the middle
Yeah.
almost. Now that's a fairly loose
No, I
comparison,
agree
but
with what you're saying there.
but
Yeah.
it's in some ways the most Zeppelin like song on the side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you're going to talk about Led Zeppelin as an influence on Heart, it really that's how it strikes me.
Yes, and it kind of it does, breaking into these different parts, kind of moving back and forth between the reality that the singer's singing, also similar to what you'll hear on a number of Zeppelin songs. And this one continues this kind of rant against um, the day-to-day life, the hens talking, as the ladies, they talk about their men, too soon, nighttime's coming on, deep in the darkness, feeling alone, like these women don't want to go home. And then kind of ends with no rain, no seed. No rain, no seed. I mean, this is like, we're not going to be able to feed ourselves in the future. I mean, that's a dark thing. Again, no dreams, no silence. So not only don't you have dreams, it's there's no silence. This is constantly this bickering of these hens, and everything around you is constantly there. So and it that whole sequence, this thing kind of abruptly ends, and you actually hear silence for a few seconds, and then it lightly breaks back into that, again, quiet, kind of resuming where it left off on that first peaceful piece, back at the soul of the sea, where the song continues and ends. So it kind of it starts and finishes with this place of peace, but it does want to show you a little bit in the middle of what things are like when you're not there. And so kind of this place of escape becomes, it reminds you that there are these places to escape and get away from what is a, again, kind of a jagged, aggressive, mean. And there's a meanness to Ann Wilson's voice as she's getting into that end piece of no rain, no seed. I mean, it's angry. The way that she's singing, I think she does a good job with that.
And I don't disagree with your take on the lyrical aspects of the song. Although, if the words "no rain, no seed" were sung in a performance by, let's say, Janet Jackson or Jennifer Lopez,
Mm-hmm.
it would clearly be sexual in nature.
Yes.
Um, but I agree. That's not what, or at least that's not how I take it when sung by Ann Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely different. And I like what you had said earlier about the concept of tomorrow being very different in Hart's sort of conceptual universe compared to other artists. Kind of that, tomorrow, enjoy today because tomorrow may not come, or whatever.
Which, I mean, and that's a rock and roll kind of concept.
Yeah.
It's like we got to enjoy today, worry about tomorrow. I mean, that's you get a sense of that in a lot of kind of that basic rock and roll feel. That doesn't mean that everything is, folks.
But there's also, don't stop thinking about tomorrow.
That's true. Yeah.
And Hart is much less. I mean, I'm not trying to accuse Fleetwood Mac of being trite.
Yeah.
But Hart is definitely not trite. I mean, it's kind of part of this sort of don't give up on your dreams. Look forward to tomorrow. That really is kind of a part of where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this track comes to an end, and then we have basically the song Dreamboat Annie returns. It's the same song. They've got some additional lyrics that they bring in the end. I think it gives again a picture of there's some it talks about the probably the most negative aspect of the song is it's talking about other people, the sad faces painted over these magazine smiles. Again, a lot of people maybe acting happy. Again, I see this in the big city, and they aren't necessarily there. We can obviously deal with this in the modern age. I would call this the Facebook family and the Facebook life that people have. They're projecting something that is incredibly positive, even though, and some of it is positive. But the bottom line is when you're looking at other people, you have no idea whether they're happy or they're sad or they're being successful or they're not. And I think the writer of this realizes this, but they're going to focus on their own opportunity, and they're going to give it a serious try because the song ends with "won't be back for a while." And I really think that this is where I'm going, and I'm going to continue to go there for a while, and give this a real try. So, and the song, those lyrics kind of repeat, "won't be back for a while." It kind of softens up, and that's how the side trails off in a very soft ending. And you said it before, and I think that the song Dreamboat Annie is a beautiful song. The side starts very hard and heavy and ends very calm and peaceful at the end, making it another example of a side of music that I feel is very well put together from start to finish, with a real variety of songs, but that seem to fit together very well and give you a single experience that's enjoyable.
Well, and I agree, and it's another one that should be really very accessible to anyone who listens to classic rock radio. I mean, Magic Man, Crazy on You, and Dreamboat Annie are songs that people that just listen to the radio and that's their only source of music will probably be familiar with each of those songs.
Yep.
And then Soul of the Sea it's just one more song, and that's probably the most substantial song, both musically and lyrically on the album.
Hmm.
And it's a good one, and it kind of fits in with these other themes. Not that they're all the same theme, but they all fit
Yeah.
together very nicely.
Yeah.
I would agree with you that it is an exceptional single side of music to listen to.
And another one that we've gone through on the sideshow. So, yep, good conversation, Mike. Good side of music. Encourage everybody to check it out, and we will check you all out the next time around.
Sounds good.